When Cassie Jaye released the Red Pill movie, I did a series of rebuttal videos to the feminists she interviewed. I've linked to the playlist of them in the low bar. Recently, Jaye has started releasing a series of videos called the Red Pill Raw Files. Each video contains footage from the movie that didn't make the final cut. I've linked to her channel for those interested. Her latest in the Red Pill Raw Files is an expanded version of her interview with Ms. Magazine editor Katherine Spillar on reproductive freedoms for both sexes. Watching it lays to rest part of the false narrative about Cassie Jaye being spun in the media. That is, that she was out to get feminists on behalf of MRAs. You will see in the minutes ahead that she could have made it much worse for feminists. Nearly all of Spillar's additional time is filled with her being more valuable to MRAs than Big Red. Hubris and privileged arrogance drips from her every word, and she props up that inflated self-worth with a complete absence of rational thought and human compassion. If Cassie Jaye was acting on behalf of MRAs, she'd have used this full tilt in the movie. To be honest, Spillar is so completely in left field that I won't be doing a standard rebuttal. I don't have time to make an hour-long video fisking every word that came out of her mouth. Instead, in my conclusion, I will speak to the larger lesson here, the more important takeaways from Spillar's performance. Now, having given you a bit of a spoiler, let's proceed with a look at the raw file entry on reproductive rights for men with Katherine Spillar.
So, talking about reproductive rights,
Right.
Women have made a lot of advances and progress. Men's rights activists feel like they have virtually no reproductive rights. Do you think they do?
Sure they do. Men have the right to take responsibility for contraception and birth control. And then if they have fathered a child, taking responsibility for that child's upbringing.
Okay, we are at roughly 16 seconds of Spillar answering the first question, which was whether men had or should have reproductive rights. Spillar immediately and with rehearsed precision informs us that men have a right to condoms and to being responsible for women's choices after they exercise their reproductive rights. That isn't hyperbole on my part, it's not exaggeration or in any way misleading. Straight out of the gate, Spillar says in effect that men have no reproductive rights at all, that the only way men even play into the discussion of reproductive rights is by taking full and complete responsibility for contraception, or absent that, doing the bidding of women. Gents, you have the right to a rubber, a scalpel, an unintended family, or a child support order that threatens your freedom. Once she is pregnant, you have the right to do exactly what you're told. There's your rights. Spillar goes on. With a brave heart, let us listen to her.
This whole fight on reproductive rights right now is definitely, there's no question, it's part of the backlash. If you think about it, and actually I was at a United Nations conference and heard a woman from Brazil talking about the fight in her country for reproductive rights for women.
Okay, I need to stop here for a moment to point out this dog-tired technique of feminists when discussing any so-called women's issue that happens to be one that doesn't affect them. She is exporting the alleged crisis, using circumstances from a foreign culture that she knows nothing about to dismiss serious human rights issues like zero reproductive rights for men right here, which was the point of the question. Usually feminists do this using the Middle East as their scapegoat, but in this case, Brazil gets the nod.
And for girls, and there the Catholic Church has tremendous influence on government policy making and on the laws that are made. The Catholic Church, and of course, not only is abortion illegal, that birth control is illegal.
Okay, so Spillar is not only going to declare zero reproductive rights for men as morally correct, she is now going to falsely justify it in the name of protecting women's reproductive rights. This is pure bullshit. I've never seen any organized or even unorganized efforts by MRAs or MGTOW to restrict women's reproductive rights. The only thing I have seen running through 10 plus years of open commentary about it on the internet is the eyebrow-raising suggestion that women need to take responsibility for the rights they have when it comes to reproduction. One of the most basic premises we have today regarding women's reproductive freedom is that consent to sex does not constitute consent to motherhood or parenting. That 15 minutes of spontaneous sex does not equate to a commitment to a massive, life-altering change. It is a compelling argument to many, I'd say most people, not so popular with others. The counter-argument from MRAs has always been, well, fine. Now let's respect women's reproductive freedom and extend the same to men. Consent to sex is not consent to fatherhood. Men should have a choice during the same time that a woman can legally get an abortion to opt out of responsibility for the child. It is not a strange concept, even to feminists. Karen DeCrow, a noted feminist scholar and former president of the National Organization for Women, had the following to say, and I quote, "The courts have properly determined that a man should neither be able to force a woman to have an abortion nor prevent her from having one should she so choose. Justice therefore dictates that if a woman makes a unilateral decision to bring pregnancy to term, and the biological father does not and cannot share in this decision, he should not be liable for 21 years of support." Or, put another way, autonomous women making independent decisions about their lives should not expect men to finance their choice. Unquote. Alas, that was not Katherine Spillar's elitist Hollywood Hills version of feminism. Not that I want to be too indulgent with second-wave feminists on this. DeCrow's thinking represented a slight and far less than influential fraction of feminist thought, and she was widely lambasted by the feminists of her time for championing the reproductive rights of men. Still, her idea is on the record, and it did not even originate with MRAs. It came straight out of feminist leadership, shortly before DeCrow was no longer considered feminist leadership. And it is a statement that also brings female contraception and women's responsibility for it right back into the picture, which is why Spillar would not get near it. If you'll permit the digression here, it seems to me that what with rights supposedly coming tethered to commensurate responsibilities in life, it stands to reason that women getting the bottom line choice of whether to abort, carry, adopt away, or even tell the father about a child, that they should have 100% of the onus put on them to prevent pregnancy when they don't want to have a baby. Although I don't view this in any way as part of a platform stand for men's advocates, I do think that women, as the ones taking the physical risks of gestation, should have that choice provided they can stay out of my wallet to pay for it. I will add another note on abortion here. Despite Spillar's imaginary backlash by MRAs to undermine women's reproductive freedom, I am personally against the practice of abortion. I think it's a tragedy, and I think we should be doing everything we can to reduce the number of abortions, but I would not criminalize it. I am pretty sure I don't know any prominent MRAs who would. Criminalizing abortions is like criminalizing drugs. It makes some very simple-minded, ignorant moralists feel good about voting. It's a warm and fuzzy platform for those who believe their religious doctrine should apply to everyone. But the problem with criminalizing is the rather conspicuous fact that it doesn't work. And in many ways, it worsens things. Spillar's anti-abortion boogeymen are not MRAs. Indeed, a lot of them aren't even men, but that does not slow down Spillar's imagination. Oh well, no harm, I suppose, in making a stupid point. And speaking of stupid points, this video was full of them. In fact, it was more or less just a mindless stream of dogma about abortion with women's assumed sacredness from beginning to end out of Spillar. So for the rest of this critique, I'm going to select a couple of points in the material worthy of noting and move on to the larger lesson. You can view the full clip on Cassie Jaye's channel through the link in the low bar. Here, Spillar speaks about the importance of individual reproductive control, at least for women.
We're consumed by these issues because it is how women reach autonomy. And I knew this intellectually, but hearing it from her mouth, I was struck again by how central having control over your own fertility is to your own sense of self and well-being and free agency.
I didn't think I would ever find myself saying the words Katherine Spillar nailed it, but Katherine Spillar nailed it. Reproductive choices are far and away the most consequence-laden choices any of us will ever make. Even Spillar knows this, albeit her ability to see reproduction impacting men is non-existent. For Spillar, this is a woman-only discussion. The fact that Jay asked about men's reproductive rights flew far above all the other points that flew over Spillar's head. Reproductive consequences for men can mean a lifetime of support for a family, whether they wanted one or not. Even if he avoids marriage, it is bare minimum 18 years of child support and a slew of court orders that are enforced under pain of incarceration, as well as social and financial ruin. When men don't comply with women's reproductive choices, other men with guns come to the door to deliver some, by God, law and order. Spillar goes on about the importance of those rights, of course, as it applies to women.
And so having the ability to decide if you'll ever have children and how many and under what conditions and when is powerful. It's very powerful because it makes a woman a full human being.
Man, oh man, look at those eyes as she discusses the unilateral power of women in the reproductive process. Personally, I think she finds that ability to rule over the lives of others quite titillating. She didn't mention, nor would I have expected her to, the impact of all that unrestrained power on the lives of other human beings whose rights are supposed to be as protection-worthy as hers. It has never occurred to her, sitting there in her swanky upscale office, the amount of abuse this kind of power lends itself to, and if she does realize it, I am guessing she relishes in it. That is actually more than a guess. Spillar, as well as every other feminist of her ilk, is talking about the empowerment of women only to the extent that it can be used to disempower men. This is what Spillar is talking about, eyes gleeful and wide open as a child's on Christmas morning. I knew it a long time ago, but this image of Spillar is the definitive image. She is the kind of feminist who uses advocacy for women as an instrument to inflict harm on men. I'm well aware that there are a lot of women who call themselves feminists who might be embarrassed by women like Spillar. There are even a very few women that fall into the mold of Karen DeCrow. They actually believe in equality, even when women have to pony up their share of the responsibility for it. But there is an unfortunately high number of women in influential and powerful positions who would be quickly tagged as bigoted and manifestly evil by the world around them were they not protected by their gender and ideological privilege. Whenever people tell me that not all feminists are like that, or better yet, instructively point out to me, like I'm a neophyte, that there are many different kinds of feminism, this is where I tend to yawn and move on. Yes, there are many different kinds of feminism, but they only feel the need to point that out to you when you're talking about the feminism that is in power shaping policy, and stacking every card they can against men. Now, is this the larger lesson I referred to earlier? Nope. As a matter of fact, it's not. Indeed, you can learn everything you need to know about feminists in less than 10 minutes. The larger lesson here is that Spillar gives us a sterling example of why men are going their own way and why they should continue to do so. Spillar stands out in this talk like a supreme black widow spider, eager and arrogant in her willingness to consume men for the frivolous gratification of women's capricious desires. She is promoting her unique brand of bigotry from the executive offices of a high-profile magazine in full public view, even as she enjoys great success in circles that include very powerful people. At some point in the future, with enough time and suffering perhaps, men will look up and see lifestyles in which trust in women and the law aren't completely suicidal. I'd argue that the mere existence of women like Spillar demonstrate that that day has not arrived. When people like her are sent packing from public view like the bigots they are, then we will also likely see a lot of other needed changes. Meanwhile, I think I can safely predict that men will continue to stream away from marriage and any reproductive trust in women. And that is it for another talk. Thanks for tuning in again. I hope you've enjoyed as much as one can enjoy a review of a person like Katherine Spillar. As always, please sub to the channel, like and share the videos, and for those who can, please visit the Patreon through the low bar and become a supporter. We'll see you next time.